Welcome back to the race start. We have Kevin Ferreira on board on the Pro Round 1 of 2022 Championship Round 1 race of Pro class. And the race is a go, and we will see how these drivers fare into the first corner. Kevin Ferreira manages to hold his lead. We might see a race restart because some drivers were glitching, and with that technical Good afternoon once again, and we are set for the race start of Pro Class Round 1 of Race at Home Championship, brought to you by Ceylon Motorsports Club, partner sponsors Lab 57, J Homes and House of Glass. And we have Kevin Ferreira and Brian Ferreira, the two brothers looking out the front row, and Kevin on pole. And Kevin Ferreira is... That's the go, and the race is on. It's again an 18-lap race. Oh dear. There's MDOT has had an issue there. However, we are with Kevin Ferreira going into the 100T hairpin. Still managing to hold on to his lead, closely challenged by his brother Brian in P2, and Thiago has moved into P3. That was quite a start for Thiago. Thiago on P3, Seshan on P4. Dason Dawson on P5, and Mevan Ferreira, the third Ferreira brother, is on P6 right now. And Kevin is managing to pull a little bit of gap, almost half a second and slightly more now to Brian Ferreira there. Brian is closely challenging in his Nissan Skyline GTR Motul Auto Spec. That's a different brand altogether. However, it's a Nissan GTR that he's driving. GT2 GR2 spec car is closing in on Kevin. Kevin is managing to pull a lovely gap, almost close to a second now. And Thiago is being closely challenged by Seshan in the green GTR there. Thiago running his usual gold and blue and red livery. And all these cars are extremely powerful, extremely fast cars. Compared to what they ran last year. There, Thiago has been challenged on the outside, and still Thiago manages to keep his line into the corner and exits. And again, coming back on Thiago, Seshan has moved in on Thiago. It's pretty clean overtake. That is a fantastic drive by Seshan, and Thiago has been losing a bit of grip there. That is the reason as to why he lost it to Seshan. Seshan is up to P3. Thiago is down to P4, and we are now with Thiago. Thiago is challenged by Dasun Ranatunga as well in another Skyline, in another GTR car. Dasun goes around the outside to the corkscrew. I think Thiago is finding it a little bit difficult here to keep up with the rest of the pack. Because Thiago started the race and moved in on to P3 and now down to P5. And we are now with Mevan. Mevan is also closely challenging in on Thiago. Thiago is having some sort of trouble today. Not his best day probably. We are now with the race leader Kevin Ferreira. He is clocking second sector, his personal best. Through the 100T hairpin. And let's look at Brian. Brian is slightly away from Kevin, the race leader. Brian is currently in P2, 1.5 seconds away. And going on to P3, Seshan is now joining in on the rear of Brian. Currently 1 second away on Brian into the braking zone. There goes. I'm sure in a bit of time, in about half a lap more, Seshan will be fighting for P2. Seshan is having a beautiful rhythm today on this sunny Sunday afternoon at the raceway Laguna Seca. Going through the corkscrew, coming onto the left-hander.
How long do you think before they go in for a pit stop?
Probably by about 6th lap, they should be thinking of another pit stop. What do you think?
Do you think it's a one stop or two stop?
It will be two-stop strategy.
I think it's a one. I think these cars can manage to run 7, maybe 9, somewhere in between that, because most of them seem to be running softs.
Okay.
I think it's gonna fade somewhere about the 8th. And maybe they'll end up with about between 8 and 12% of fuel by the time they get to the line.
Okay, to get a kind of a gauge, let's look at the race leader's tyre situation. Tyres are doing pretty fine, and he's 3/4 tanks left on this race. So do you think now they have just done 4 laps and quarter tank down, and probably yeah, I think you're right. they can manage with one stop?
I think they can do a one stopper. Maybe if you want to do two, you got to really be pushing it. But Kevin seems to be, not bothered about the fuel consumption. He's not even short shifting. He's leathering the car.
And he's down to 114 now, and we would in time around lap 7 or 8 we would be able to see him clocking his 113, because lap by lap he's clocking his personal best there.
Exactly, and this is almost matching the qualifying times.
That is true. The qualifying fast time was 113, and
they're going to get 113 in this environment. You can't, because they can't do 113 in race trip. They do that, they're going to run out of tires.
Okay, so you're the pro. I would.
I know, I'm just assuming.
But I assume. Let me see.
Okay,
let me do a prediction.
Let's play devil's advocate.
Okay. Let me play a bit of a trick here. One driver is going to actually clock in 113 for sure, and it will be somebody chasing a race lead.
You know that some of these drivers can run the entire duration without a pit stop.
Yeah, probably the smoothest of the drivers. We can reckon Brian Ferreira. We saw Brian Ferreira was having a bit of a moment during practice and also during qualifying. So if he manages to keep his car smooth around this track, probably he can fetch. However, we see this year that Kevin is managing a far better race than Brian. He's smoother on his brakes and smoother on his steering inputs, and therefore as a result he has managed to now pull up a gap close to 2 seconds.
Let me watch the other drivers as well.
Let's go to the middle order. Let's go and take a look at the tail enders there. So we have Shanuk on P11. He's driving.
Shanuk took part in the endurance race in Dubai under the brand of Tapapandi.
Oh, that's him.
That's him.
All right,
That's
with
the boy.
Ashan Silva and Eshan Pires. And they managed to snap a podium position there. P2,
Precisely.
P2 I think. That was the second place. Then,
P2
yeah, I
is
guess they
somewhere.
won P2. Yes.
This guy's a good guy, sir. Let's go, Angelo, another guy.
Yeah. So I was just thinking of switching to Angelo because last year we saw he was one of the smoothest of the drivers there. Oh yes, Riyadh's going off the track.
I can't go into agriculture because they are in the desert.
And no rain, no water.
Let's
call mandatory.
Let's call Angelo. Let's call Riaz having a moment with the kitty litter. There you see Angelo beautifully drifting that car, not the ideal way around the circuit, but at least on camera.
Still managing to give a thriller to the viewers. So dear friends, we are live on CMSC Race at Home on the CMSC YouTube channel.
Let's watch Viren. Let's watch Mr. Bond.
Viren Boteju, as usual, switching to a different car from the rest of the pack and still managing to hold his aim to there.
Look at the tire wear there. He is suffering. His fuel is good. His fuel is alright, but the tires are even different. I mean, he's gone. That Honda is quite a car to handle. Angelo all over his tail. Look at Angelo's tires comparatively.
We will look at Angelo's tires. He's nursing the tires.
Angelo's tires are good. Angelo, if you ask me, I'd say that Angelo is going to run the entire distance.
But look at Viren. We will switch to Viren. Viren is challenging Angelo. That's probably why he's losing his rears. He's losing his rears as well as the front right.
The car was very heavy on his tires. The car was very heavy. See, Angelo was chasing Viren. And Viren's now, Viren always drives a car which nobody else wants to drive.
That's right. That's exactly. What is he trying to show? That he's different?
I don't know. I mean, in a car which was a one week, he was the fastest out of the entire group of 35 drivers.
Oh.
That goes to show.
What was he driving back then?
No, everybody drove the Hyundai.
Oh, that one.
Everybody drove the Hyundai. And he was the quickest out of everybody. He beat Brian and Kevin.
So I guess he should go for the popular. Yes, Viren is coming in for tires perhaps and a bit of refueling there. So while he does his pit stops, let's move on to Angelo Senaratne. He is running a very lonely race because in front of him he has Mevan Pereira a little out of sight, 2 seconds away, and behind him he has Shanuk 5 seconds down on him, so quite not able to challenge Angelo. Now we want to go to the front middle pack. We have Dason Ranathung on P4 in his black Nissan.
Some of these guys are on a no stop strategy. Kevin.
Look at Kevin's tire. Still okay, and still has more than half a tank left, and he definitely can nurse his car to the end of the race.
And if he does, it will be only for a splash and dash. He's already a country mile ahead of his brother.
Yes, that's
But
1 minute, 1 second.
Seshan is on the tail of Brian now.
That's what we need to see now. Seshan has closed in on Brian. He has been for a while. He has been under 1 second between managing that gap between himself and Brian. Now he's down to half a second now.
Seshan is going to have to come through.
He's less than a half a tank there. So
and see, if you follow a car this close, the tire degradation is really there.
and of course the car is heating up much more.
More than that, we've seen through experience that if you want to save your tires, even in this game,
you need to move out of
you
the.
need to be out of the wake and the dirty.
That's true. So, however, Seshan is trying to, manage his gap and close in on Brian now. It's less than half a second, and any moment in about a lap or two, he would be attacking. Even on this lap, it's now down to 0.2 of a second,
If I were Brian, I'd let him go.
and then try to catch him on the
There's no
slipstream.
point. The strategy is different. Their strategies are vastly different. They're trying two different strategies. So why go and upset the curl box?
But you reckon that Brian is on a no stopper as well?
Well, we are at the halfway mark.
He's on halfway, and he still have like 49.9% of his fuel tank.
By the 18th lap, depending on where
You can nurse the car through.
you nursing through.
That I agree.
I
That.
think Seshan has just realized he's moved.
That's right, because his tires are gone and his fuel is coming.
He's got-
very, very, very low.
He's got to change his mapping now. And you can see, you will find him now short shifting. He will not be throttling all the way into the berm.
He's already short shifting.
Exactly.
He's already short shifting. So it was very unfortunate. We had a lovely spectator race there. Good for the viewers. Unfortunately, he's now running a bit of a different game. And let's go back to Thiago Ferreira. He's running a very lonely race. His leader, Dason Dawson, is like 3 seconds away. And his closest contender, Shanuk, is 19 seconds away from Thiago. And where's Raizuwaim? Raizuwaim has been a very, very talented driver. He's currently running at P10 and just under a second off Angelo's pace. And Raizuwaim will have a go on Angelo, maybe about a lap down on this.
Dason's gone into the pits. Seshan, I think, is also gone into the pits.
And Riaz is just coming out of the pits. And refuel and
There's a
fresh
40
rubber.
There's a 40 second, I think, about 30 seconds of time goes for pit stop here. It's a long pit lane.
That's a very long pit
It's a
lane,
long-
and you have to also, go through the 100T hairpin in your pit lane as well. So
Exactly.
it kinds of slow down the entire process.
So this pit stop is crucial. If you do take a pit stop here, you've got to be really ready for a long haul again. Catch that time.
That is precise. So we will now go to.
Seshan is going. Let's see. It'll be interesting to see where Seshan comes up. And
Seshan is coming out.
Fifth.
He's on P5 now.
he's fifth. And what's the gap? What's the gap?
The gap is
No.
just under a second to Dasun Ranatunga.
What's the gap to Thiago?
His gap to Thiago would be that's 20 seconds.
Exactly.
Gap to Thiago is 20.
And he's got 9 laps to catch the 8 laps to catch the.
He's on fresh rubber, 3/4 of a tank of fuel, so he can.
Oh, look at that! The 2 race leaders are coming to the pits as well.
Oh dear, oh dear. Now that
has
is
changed.
that is a stinker for the Ferreira brothers, because we just presumed that they would control the race and nurse the car through with maybe a no-stopper, but as you rightly predicted,
Maybe
they are on one-stop strategy.
Maybe it's only a tire stop. There's no fuel.
No, they are refueling. They are
It's
refueling.
only a splash and dash.
Yep.
It's a
It's
splash
about
and dash.
less than a quarter of fuel and fresh rubber. We are riding now with Kevin Ferreira.
The way too hard.
And now-
Kevin is 14 seconds.
Let's talk about Thiago. Thiago has to come into pits any moment from now on.
He won't.
So he's on a no stopper.
No stopper.
But he's on the 12th lap
He's got
and
one-
2/3 of. All right,
He will cover.
technically
Technically, he should be.
nursing the car, cruising through in order
Once
to.
once he gets, and he once anyway he was fifth.
He was fifth. He started the race on 7th position.
So he will basically his lap times are 1:17, right?
Yes,
So the guy, anybody who's going to catch him has to do at least
1:14.
3 seconds a lap
That is right.
to catch him.
So then their tires will be shot as well. However,
I don't think because Thiago will be struggling in the next 2 laps.
it doesn't appear to be so because Thiago's tires are like at 55% good condition. Just to be on the positive note of it,
No, but after it goes beyond a certain point,
then you lose grip
you
and
lose big time.
so your braking has to be very early.
See the other cars as
So let's look at Kevin. Kevin is fast. Kevin is closing in on Thiago. The 13-second gap is now down to 10. It's just under 11 seconds. And the beauty of this race is Seshan has still managed to clock the fastest lap time. Now, does these drivers get a point for the fastest lap time recorded in the race? Alright, so the race director confirms the fastest lap time gets 2 points. 2 championship points means, yes, that's worth a shot, worth a try. And we are now with Kevin going through the corkscrew. And where's Brian? Brian is closely following in on his brother Kevin. Now moves through the corkscrew and coming on to the left-hander.
Brian's got the fastest sector there. I saw a purple sector coming up for Brian.
So that's the personal best as well as overall best. And I would like to stick with Brian to see how he manages to end this lap.
Dason is managing to keep Seshan behind. That's going to really mess up Seshan's.
Oh, there's another personal best by Brian Ferreira there. So he had. Oh, Kevin, look at Kevin. Kevin has already clocked in 1:13.
Exactly.
And I reckon that Brian will better that time. He will jump Kevin on this lap because he's on a hot lap.
There's a bit of a gamesmanship between the two brothers anyway.
That is right.
And we've got 3 brothers racing today.
Yeah, 3 brothers and a father on the AM.
Yep.
Saman Ferreira is on the AM class and Brian, Kevin, Mivan all are driving in this pro class.
How's Angelo doing?
I would like to wait with Brian for a second. Okay, while we wait with him, let's go and take a look at Angelo Senaratne.
Catching Mevan.
He's catching Mevan. The gap is close to half a second now. Mevan is driving a smoother race, but to be a little slower than the rest of the Ferreira brothers on this pack now.
Lexus is not the car.
Probably because I see most of the drivers are very comfortable with the Nissan GTR, the GT2 spec car.
The Lexus is very twitchy. Very twitchy.
Let's take a look at one of our very good drivers, Rai Suwaim. He's also having a lonely battle there. 2 seconds up on Viren and 3 seconds down to Angelo. Angelo is closing in on Mevan. The gap is close just under a second. It's down to 0.6 seconds. And now he's catching him on the slipstream on the main stretch.
There's not much of a slip here because the game has been structured in such a
And going
way.
into the Andretti hairpin.
Nice inside line there. Perfectly done. Looks.
And the gap is very close. It's anybody's game now. Angelo, he can definitely take Mevan into a braking zone.
Do you think Brian has caught Kevin by now?
Not yet. Brian is 2 seconds, 2.6 seconds away from Kevin. He was much closer. No, actually, he's closing in on him. And let's look at Thiago. Thiago's gap has come to my mini 1 second. It's just under 1 second now, which was 13 seconds gap. A couple of laps before. Kevin Ferreira has now managed to close in on Thiago and it's down to half a second. And it's just about any time that Kevin Ferreira takes Thiago. Go through he goes on the inside. through the 100 we have him. That was a lovely move. I think Thiago's tires are shot. And my dear friends, viewers, I have a very experienced driver joining me on the commentary here today at Race Control. I have Brian Todd, and it's about time that Brian would join us on the mic. And until he does, let's keep it with Kevin. Kevin has managed to pull a lovely gap on Thiago's. Let's look at Thiago's tires. Oh, it's gone. Thiago is challenged by Brian as well, moves on the inside, and Thiago loses his position to Brian. And Brian is now up to P2. Thiago's tires are gone, and he's on fumes, and his fuel is like on the very, very edge. He cannot really power through. The tires are not giving the grip, and he's worried about his fuel, and therefore, as a result, he needs to nurse the car home because he has not stopped. And now Dason Ranatunga, who was running a very distant P5, who moved up to P4, is now managing to challenge Thiago Ferreira, who managed to stay on the lead for a while. And because his strategy, I don't know whether it was right, I don't know whether it was wrong, or whether he took a chance. Now it's Dason's game to take on Thiago. Thiago's and Dason's gap is down to 0.2 seconds, and it's just 2 corners away that Dason takes Thiago, and Thiago is currently holding on to his dear podium, and there he goes. Dason is also challenged by Seshan. This is a lovely battle brewing up between 3 fantastic drivers, 3 cars abreast, and they are going into the corkscrew. What could happen in corkscrew? No, that was I beg your pardon, that was the corkscrew. They are going through the Rahal straight into the corkscrew right about now. Thiago has the lead, and Seshan tries on the outside, and while we were focused on Thiago, Dason has moved into P3, and would he manage to spring a surprise to the leading Ferreira brothers? They are right now, as they started the race, Kevin was on pole, Brian was on P3. The 2 Ferreira brothers are leading the rest of the pack. However, Dason is closing in on Brian Ferreira. Not enough time left. And let me look at Thiago. Thiago is now closely challenged by Seshan. It's just about now that Seshan goes on the outside trying to challenge Thiago into the 100 hairpin. Would he manage to stay ahead of Thiago at the end of the 100? Yes. Seshan has moved in on Thiago, and he has jumped Thiago into P4. Thiago has got the strategy totally wrong, and he's on fumes. He has to nurse the car for the checkered flag. Luckily, his closest contender, Mivan Pereira, is 14 seconds down on Thiago. Let's now divert our focus onto the race leader. He's on the final lap. And Kevin Ferreira and Brian Ferreira has managed to give a lovely race today here at Laguna Seca, the WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca, and he's coming into the final corner. He is coming into the final corner and onto the main stretch, takes the checkered flag. Kevin Ferreira wins from Brian Ferreira and Dason Ranatunga, and Seshan takes the checkered flag right about now, and Thiago Ferreira nurses the car through. The tires are short, he's on fumes, still manages to bring the car home for a 5th place, takes the checkered flag now, and we have Mivan Ferreira in a beautiful chromium finished car. He's driving a Lexus, takes the checkered flag, though he was challenged by Angelo Senaratna. Angelo, had he been given half a lap more, he definitely could have taken Mivan into P6. Raisuan takes the checkered flag at P8, and we are now with Viren coming to the finish line and finishing and taking the 9th position, and Chanup takes 10th. Riaz Hafran has been lapped by Kevin Ferreira in the final lap, and Riaz has taken the checkered flag behind Kevin Ferreira. Kevin Ferreira is the winner on the race round 1 of Pro Class. The race brought to you by Ceylon Motorsports Club, partnered by Lab 57, J Homes, House of Glass, and our social media partner, Pit Pass.
1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastota hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastota hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastota hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastota hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastota hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time. In 1934, Phil Falk sets a record at the first Mahagastara hill climb. 1936, Mrs. Gordon Graham, the first female racer to compete in her Austin 65. 1959, Mrs. Monica Collier enters the racing circuit. And now it's the age of digital motorsports. The oldest motorsports club in Sri Lanka with a glorious heritage of 87 years and attuned to shifting times keeps rubber burning on tarmac, dust spooling on dirt, and quarter miles conquered. Ceylon Motorsports Club, the iconoclast ahead of its time.
Welcome back to the race round 1 of AM class, and we have Ashan Silva on pole and Adam Junaid, a very young driver, on P2. And Kushan Pires on P3 and Mivan on P4. The engines are revving and somebody has jumped the start. He was rolling and now it's the real start for the race. There was a bit of a touch from Mahilal Pires, who was starting from the tail end, and he's now down to P14. Ashan Silva has been challenged by Adam Junaid and he has moved into P1 around the 100T hairpin. That was a brilliant move by a very young driver on a pro driver, Ashan Silva. And Kushan Pires, look at that. Look, Kushan has moved into P2. Ashan is down to P3 right now. And look at Adam Junaid. He's around 30. He's a teen, He's a teen, and he was driving in the AM class last year as well. And now Adam Junaid.
Evan has got taken Ashan as well. What happened?
No idea. Let's move down on the pack now. We are with Kushan. He's on P2. Devan on P3, Ashan is down to P4 and now challenged by Inup Madhumarachi through the corkscrew.
I'm wondering if there was a little bit of contact in that first corner, because I didn't see Ashan lose too much time at the start, but even the first corner...
Well, actually he was leading. He was leading and he was challenged immediately into Andretti by Adam.
We have maybe the stewards will look at that corner, that incident. There was one to see contact because Adam did come out of the corner with penalty, which means there must have been some penalty.
Oh, understood. And now we are with Pansiru Abe. He's on P6. Sam D. Smith in his very cool-looking grey Porsche. Lalit Sedara is on P8. Saman Ferreira, the father of the Ferreira brothers, with his Target Color Lab logo on the cars, he's on P9. Mahilal Peer is on P10. And Thamindra on P11. Rukshan on P12. Sachetana Patirage, another very well-known e-racing figure, he's on P13. Sajid Rupasinghe on P14. And while we are focused on the tail-enders, Adam Junaid has clocked in the fastest lap time, 1 minute 28 seconds. And Kushan Piris is down 1 second on Adam. And Adam is looking quite comfortable out there.
She's just out of DRS range.
Yeah, speaking of F1, yes. he's quite safe. And pulling the gap also, look at that. It was 1 second, now it's 1.3.
Interesting. Let's see what's going to happen now. Again, strategies will play a big role in this one, and Mevan Vikramasinghe is another seasoned campaigner. He came second or third, I can't quite remember, in the last championship with the race home in the M class. So we're going to see some decent racing here. Interestingly, all of the 13 cars, 12 happen to be Porsches.
And look at Adam. Adam has clocked in 1 minute 21 seconds. He's clocking lap after lap, and he's giving his absolute best on this Sunday at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. I think Adam has been doing his homework well.
Kushan is catching. Look at the gap now between Kushan. See, I told you, Kushan is catching it. So this lap, Kushan is going to get a fast lap from the two, I presume.
Oh, Kushan Piris is managing to hold on to the rear of Adam, and Adam has to be a little bit worried now. If he starts to look in his rear view mirrors, then that's the time that he's going to actually let the contender through. Kushan is very, very close on Adam, and the gap is down to half a second now. It's anybody's game in about.
He's going to pressurize Adam to make a mistake.
They're coming through the final corner onto the main stretch, and look at the gap. It's coming down to 0.3 of a second.
He's got the slip there as well.
And taking the slipstream, closing in on Adam, going through to the unready corner. Oh, look at that! Look at that! That was a fantastic move. That is where Adam Junaid.
Again, I'm wondering, was that
more than a contact, I reckon that Adam was too worried on his rear view mirrors, and Kushan came. I just mentioned it half a lap ago, and that's what not these drivers should be a bit worried about, because this is virtual racing. You're not going to hurt yourself. Okay, you can race clean and still, look what ahead of you, rather than being focused on the rear view mirrors. Now look at Kushan's tires. Kushan has nursed his tires better compared to Adam. Adam has lost a bit of tires there as well. And let's go down to Mevan. Mevan is on P3, 2 seconds away from Adam, going through the corkscrew now.
We're going to have Ryan Todd also in the house here, giving us some expert comments. Ryan, what do you think about all this whole thing? You've been a driver, you've raced it out on the real world, and it's your first day seeing what's happening in this world. Your comments?
Well, it's very interesting to see, because looking at these guys driving, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how they're using strategies, and everything is coming into play here. You can't really say it's experience, but it's a lot of it's just understanding the whole virtual aspect of the whole thing,
and the game itself.
It's just fabulous. Just watching them, it's unbelievable. Of course, them choosing their cars, you can see that obviously the Porsches are doing much better than the Mercedes, and it's understood why 13 people are running or 9 people are running Porsches, and then you do have a few of them who would obviously like to step out and try a different thing, but well, you have to have that as well. So.
Yeah, just to make it a little spicy. And while we were talking on the on that aspect of gaming here, we saw Tamindra moved in on Sam D. Smith and moved into P7, and Sam is down to P8, and Sachetana Patiraki is back at P9. Now, you were talking about these cars. Would you like to shed some light, Ryan, as to how these drivers set up their cars, talking about fuel mapping and, what sort of strategy they need to work? Just give some insight for the viewers to be more understanding of the whole setup.
But yeah, Ruchan, when you actually look at this, it's all about strategy. It's all about your tire wear. It's all about your fuel map. It's about managing your fuel load, right? It's managing your tires. And it is a fact of the more you enjoy it, the more you play, the more you get in with, the more strategies you play around with, you come to an understanding that this would be the best way. See, it's not pedal to metal from the start. You have to run certain strategies in order to win a race. Even a pit stop. Whether we watched in the previous race where the Ferreira brothers, they came in just a basic fuel load, tires, and they were out again. They were not running.
Okay, sir. Let me tell you something. Yes, we've got the zone link which is running on where we can see all the drivers actually physically driving in from race control. So we know who's driving actually wherever they are in the world. And I just saw Sam Smith. He's driving on a controller. He's not using the steering wheel.
Good man. That's fabulous. That's fabulous.
That kudos to Sam Smith, because driving in a controller on today's e-racing scenario, it takes a whole lot of talent, and you lose a bit of real world touch to it, isn't it?
You lose virtually everything on that.
That's
You're
right.
with the controller. You're playing with two fingers.
Yeah, I know. So it's kind of very tough to play on controllers. Personally, Ryan, if you were to race e-racing, what would you choose?
Well,
Not the car I'm asking, your rig setup.
sorry.
Your setup, as in your hardware, what would you go for? Oh, look at that! Mahilal Piris, he previously had a shunt with Saman Ferreira, and he has lost control again. And that is not what we want to see here. Especially going through the corkscrew. He lost it at the corkscrew, and he got thrown away under the bridge. That's what happened to Mahilal.
Well, Laguna Seca is a challenging
Oh, look at that. That's the last corner, and Saman Pereira was, being a little too eager on the throttle and losing rear all by himself. All right, Ryan, so we were speaking about, if you were to race in e-racing, what sort of a hardware setup would you choose?
Well, steering and pedals for one, without a doubt, right? Because I don't think I would get through one lap even using a controller, But thing is, looking at that, there are multiple setups, like from the play scenes to so many of them, and it all depends on the whole feel. The thing is, to be honest, I've just enjoyed this, but I haven't pushed myself in, because you can see that most of the top-notch professionals don't stand a chance even against the juniors, because it's all about them getting that feel of it, getting into that, it's a totally different game.
It's all about, feeling at home at a virtual racing scenario. So that is why we see people like Adam Junaid has actually managed to challenge real world racing heroes like Ashan Silva. But Ashan is managing to hold on to P3 round.
But Ashan is working his way up. He's back. He's in third. He's sitting in third place.
He knows the game. He knows how to play. It's just that he needs to feel at home. And while we were talking on all these drivers, we are on to 8th lap. That's the halfway mark. And
so it's going to be interesting to see who's going to pick first, or what pit strategies they're going to run this time. If you look at Adam is also running quite a lot of tire wear.
That's right.
And his fuel load is also dropping.
Let's look at the race leader, Kushan.
He's doing pretty well. He's handling it pretty well. He's handling it really well.
I think he would have to come into pits, because we are still on the 8th lap, and he has less than half a tank left. And let us look at the people like Inuk Madhumarachi. And while we have his dad sitting us with the race control. Alright, his tire, look at his tire. Right front tire is almost gone. It's halfway through.
Yeah, 60%
and his fuel load is also much lesser than what we saw on Kushan Davis's car. What's happening here?
Well, it all depends on your setup and again your driving style and keeping that pedal to the metal. You see, there is a percentage where you have to be gentle, you have to nurse it, you have to understand the whole dynamics of the whole running system of the car.
Right.
So once you've mastered that, yes, then you will find that you could really bring this in with just you can bring it home really beautifully.
Understood. And let's divert our focus on the race leader. He's 7 seconds up on Adam tonight. He's managed to keep a very, very comfortable gap. And there's a yellow flag. What has gone wrong? Which sector? There's yellow flag going on and very unfortunate.
I think the dad needs to get a bit of advice from the sons here. Maybe to understand the whole feel of it a little bit. I think with age it kind of becomes a bit difficult also because we like to do it our own way. But sometimes the kids might actually be able to give you a bit of a head up on it.
Of course. And Saman Ferreira, he's lost it a bit and he's coming into the pits now. And Sajid Rupasinghe, he's running all over the track, probably not being able to handle the power of these cars. And don't forget, Ryan, last year they were running the GR3 4th car.
Yes.
All right. So they were running the Evolutions, and from that they've been promoted to GR3, and they are driving virtual Porsches today. Probably they don't know how to play around with it because last year they are used to driving these 4-wheel setups. So talk us through how does this all-wheel drive and being upgraded to rear-wheel drive machines, how does that change your driving attributes?
So Rukshan, you have to remember one thing. Even though this is a virtual game, right? Your drive, it's like driving an actual car because all your assistants are taken off. It's not like when you play for the fun of it. This is very serious gaming. And when all that is taken off, you could spin a car, you could lose it, you power it through much you like. There are so many factors. And these are rear-wheel drive cars, right? So you're going to have all of that coming right at you, right, when you're running it. Whereas when they were running the 4-wheel drives, it tends to handle better. You can pull it through. It's a mix of both worlds.
Oh, look at that. Sam Smith. I mean, we were talking about Sam, using a controller, and he managed to pip Ashan through to P3, and Ashan managed to come back on him and into the corkscrew. It took Sam Smith, took him by surprise, and Ashan moved into P3. That was a lovely battle brewing between the two.
Honestly, what Sam is doing is fabulous with the controller. I'm totally shocked. I'm like totally stunned by it,
And you can see into certain corners, Sam is adjusting his the steering input. Lift a bit, left and right, and left and right. The car seems to be dancing. Don't you think? Even in a virtual race setup, in a virtual environment, putting too much steering inputs, left, right, wouldn't it unbalance the car?
Well, if you were running a steering, yes. But when you're running a controller, it's all just a fraction of a movement of your thumb, right? Which controls everything. And it is not easy at all to hold that on a controller. So, like you said, hats off to him. He's doing a fabulous job with that controller.
Fabulous job it is. And we are now with our race leader, Kushan Piris. He is comfortably away.
Oh, yes.
And that's an 8-second, going through the corkscrew there. It's an 8-second gap. And Adam, I seriously do not see posing a threat to the race leader. Adam is on fresh rubber. He has half a tank of fuel. And as opposed to, Kushan is on fresh rubber too.
Oh, yes.
He has just bitten and just managed to get some fuel in. And I think this is his race to lose.
So it's going to be interesting to watch between the two leaders how the gap, whether the gap is going to increase or whether it's going to close in, whether Kushan is going to get comfortable with his gap and just hold there, or whether he's going to actually push to increase that gap even further. So it's going to be a very interesting race to watch.
While we were focused on the leaders, there was a bit of a moment that Ashan had, but he managed to take control of the car. Ashan Silva is currently having a podium position P3 provisionally, and Inup Madhumarachi is 3.5 seconds away. Do you think we have 4 laps left? Can Inuk close in on Ashan?
Well, looking
Both are on fresh rubber.
both
They
are
have
on fresh
taken it.
rubber. Yeah. Well, there is well, you can see when you do watch it, there is a drop. It keeps. If you see, yes, it's dropping, it's increasing, it's dropping, depending
That
on
is-
each thing. So, but of course, you have to give Inuk credit. He's only 14 years old,
And
right? So-
he's driving with a veteran, as a pro racer, Ashan Silva, who's in his 30s.
Exactly.
So it's good to see Ashan back on the podium, because last year he wasn't in contention much. Last year, Ryan, though Ashan was participating, he wasn't in contention much. But it's good to see coming into 2022, these pro drivers, real world pro drivers, actually giving the absolute best and bouncing back in the E version of it.
The beautiful thing about this is, it's interesting because you actually give the youngsters an opportunity to drive against the pros, which builds additional confidence for them. All in all, because see, most of the time you find, and if you do get it, when a novice comes in with a professional, they find it so hard because they say, he's a pro, and they get scared.
That's
But
right.
in this, there is a confidence building factor that is also coming in here, and they are getting there. They're like, okay, hey, we're on the ball, and it's good. It's good because it's building the youngsters' confidence, right?
And do you think that that this kind of racing practice would help them when they walk into the real world of racing?
Well, looking at this kind of game and this kind of setup and this kind of car control and stuff, definitely it's going to help them. There's no two words, right? Of course, you would say there would be a different feel to it, but you would understand the dynamics behind it all.
That is true.
Exactly.
So it's almost like getting into karts and driving cars before you get into the real racing.
Most certainly, but isn't that the strategy right around the world?
That's true. That is true. So everyone, even Formula One drivers are participating in this e-racing. I saw last year after the season was over, Charles Leclerc and several other pro drivers who are at the pinnacle of sport was driving e-version of it, participating in the games.
If you actually look at the F1 drivers, they do drive simulators, which are also e-based.
That is electronic, of
which
course.
are electronic. So they practice in simulators as well.
That is
so,
true.
So you can't really say, you can't just say this is just a game.
No.
It's not just a game. It's serious racing.
It's real thing without the G-force.
Exactly.
That is true. So that is Ryan Todd for you, ladies and gentlemen, all our viewers, and he will manage to stick with us around this year. I suppose, Ryan, your insights, technical input of this is very, very helpful when it comes to actually nurturing these young drivers. Now we are down to 14th lap. We are on the 14th lap. Inuk Madhumarach is on 4th and going through the corkscrew right about now. And we saw Mevan and Sam Smith. They were having a bit of a battle, but unfortunately Mevan has got ahead of Sam. He's 3.3 seconds away. What had happened to Sam? We don't know. Unfortunately, it was a lap ago. They were driving side by side.
It's also very interesting to see between the 6th place, Sam Smith, and the 7th place, there is almost 11-second or 12-second
It's
gap.
a 12.5-second
12
gap.
and a half second gap, which is, and they're driving the same car.
They are driving the same car, Porsche.
So it's very interesting to watch this. It's really interesting to see these guys run.
Niroshan, do you see what Tamindra is, or what sort of a hardware setup he is? Is he on a controller, or is he on a... He's with a steering wheel and pedals. So Tamindra, who's on the screen you saw as Raw 618, is actually running a real setup. Now we can see all the drivers, and they are quite focused, man. They are quite focused.
Yeah, they're really locked in. Huh?
They're locked in, and it's like watching a real F1 driver training. They are very serious about what they're doing. That's a fantastic. And all the viewers actually can see these drivers. So we are with, let's focus on our race leader Kushan Piris. It's 6.5 seconds gap to the P2 position. Adam has managed to pull a lovely gap to Ashan. It's 12.5 seconds.
But if you can see the gap between Adam and Kushan keeps
It's coming
changing, coming down. So I think Kushan is easing off a little bit. He's easing off. He's taking it a bit easy because he knows he does have this thing, and he's on his final lap. So he's sitting pretty.
Oh, this is the final lap, and the drivers go through the fifth corner onto. They would be right about. Yes, the leader is entering into the Rahal straight, the straight just before the corkscrew, and it will be interesting to watch. And he's coming into lap another driver. That would be. Yes, that is a race leader. Kushan Piris managing it very well. He's coming to lap Rukshan. Patirana Rukshan lets him through. And Kushan Piris is on his final few corners, taking the right-hander before he takes the final elbow turn. It's a left-hander before the main straight. And here we have our race leader, Kushan Piris, taking the car home and taking the checkered flag first. And we have then Adam Junaid and now joining in the party, coming into taking his checkered flag right about now. That was a wonderful race driven by Kushan Piris and Adam Junaid. There's Ashan Silva. He is 12 seconds away from P2 and now coming in onto the main stretch. And Ashan has been closed in on by Inuk Madhumarachi, and he's celebrating himself before he takes the checkered flag, weaving the car. And we have Mevan taking P5, and he joins the main stretch now and taking the checkered flag. It was a very beautiful race today.
Oh, that was so
no
interesting.
incidents apart from Saman Ferreira going off track a bit and momentarily, and also we had another driver who ran off track. Other than that, these drivers have given their absolute best. It was a very entertaining race to watch, but compared to the last season, I would have enjoyed a little more battle among these amateurs, because last year AM class gave us the best race of the day. Every day, every Sunday, they gave us the best race because they were on the all-wheel drive Evolutions and Subarus, and they gave in the best of their talent. So going into the season, we have more races to come, and so that was the end of the race round 1 of AM class. Race at Home 2022 Championship brought to you by Ceylon Motorsports Club and partnered with Lap 57, J Homes and House of Glass, and our social media partner. A big thanks go to Pit Pass. So ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for the race round 2 of Pro Class, and we'll be back with you shortly. And a good evening to all the viewers out there. And we are now witnessing the race round 2 of the pro class. The interesting thing about this year is that we are running the reverse grid of top 10. The people who finish in the top 10 will be reversed, and therefore as a result we have Shanuk on P1, Viren on P2, Rai Suvaim on P3, Dason on P4, and I beg your pardon, Rise on P3, and that's the race start for you. And one driver has not managed to start, that will be Imdad. However, we are with Thiago. Thiago has managed to get a decent race start, and all the drivers are glitching. Thiago has managed to. Oh, there. What's wrong with Viren? Viren is going off track, and that will be a technical fault. Therefore, the race control will go for a race restart. We will, while we go for a race restart, I would like to remind you that this race is brought to you by Ceylon Motorsports Club, envisioning the future of Sri Lankan motorsports with partnerships from Lab 57, J Homes, House of Glass, and with our social media partner Pit Pass. And today we have at the race control the race director Samita Heenkenda, also working as the race steward, and with us in the race control we have Ryan Todd joining in the commentary with myself. I'm Rukshan Halpita, and it's a fantastic Sunday. What a way to spend Sunday evening before we all get home and tune into the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Yes. And we have 15 drivers. We had 15 drivers who entered, who registered for this race round 1. Unfortunately, a couple of drivers were not able to participate. Therefore, we have 12 drivers participating in this race round 2. And the race is happening at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, which has a 3.6 kilometer race distance and an official real-world racing lap record of 1 minute 7 seconds. Now, Ryan, 1 minute 7 seconds in real-world racing. And our boy seems to be doing quite a good job with 1:13s.
Oh yes, it's actually really good to watch these guys doing what they're doing. It's going to be interesting after looking at the first round, how it's going to be and how the strategies are going to change, especially their pitch strategies, their settings, because obviously now they've learned from all the blunders and everything that they've made. So it's going to come in. It's going to be a pretty interesting race, and we're going to see some. I guess we will see some good strategies. And especially because they've reversed the order, right? It's also going to be quite challenging for the guys at the back of the grid.
That is true.
Right? So the guys who were in front have moved all the way to the back. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they're going to work their way up the back.
Actually, Ryan, only the top 10 grid positions are reversed. So the fast drivers who finished the race, in P1, 2 and 3, I think they would be battling it out in the middle order and going to enjoy themselves a lot.
Oh yes. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a really interesting race.
And we have Brian Ferreira, last year's pro class champion. He managed to finish P2 before, so he would be obviously starting from P9. And we can see a lot of overtaking in this round.
Yes, it like I said, it's going to be pretty interesting. Mainly to watch these guys work their way through, because it's going to be a fact of the other guys also trying to defend their places, right? And but let's see whether we are going to have any incidents or anything like that, because obviously with all of that, you would not want to give your place to the next guy.
That is true. Right? Racing is racing.
Racing is racing.
And you don't want to follow cars. You basically need to lead and overtake as much as possible, exactly. As many cars as possible. Now, the most interesting thing coming into this 2022 is that even the pro class have upgraded their cars into GR2 spec. It's much faster, much more agile, and likewise, as fast as these cars are, the drivers actually have quite a bigger challenge at their hands when it comes to car control.
Exactly. It's not only the car control, but see, with this, they actually keep changing all their settings even on the move, from even their brake bias to their fuel maps. Everything can be changed as they drive. So it's basically they are on the ball, because at every little corner and every stretch, they have to do certain changes to make their car perform. And that is the key factor in this whole game. Right?
That is true.
The reality is that.
The most beautiful thing is that the drivers now get to sample the real world racing switches that they do on the steering wheel into e-racing. So the Sri Lankans have the perfect opportunity to mimic a real world racing scenario at the comfort of their own homes.
So I looking at the future, Rukshan, I would say with that kind of hands-on feel, I think we have a few hopefully Formula One drivers with the Sri Lankan flag back in them. That might be pretty interesting to watch, at least in esports.
At least on esports. That is my hope, and that's what I pray for, actually. Because Sri Lanka has not managed to produce many international standard race drivers, starting all the way from Mr. David Pires himself, going on to Dilanta Malagumo. Then we have Ishan Pires, the junior most son of David Pires, racing in the international arena. Now we have Jevan David battling it out in the karts. And do you think that that young talent like Jevan would be seen in single-seater real-world racing in the years to progress?
Well, I'm sure you would see that. You would definitely see that, because his dad, Johan, is also very focused on getting him up there and developing. It's not, we have to also remember that it's not an easy task, because it's also very costly, and we need a lot of sponsors to come and back them to actually give them the boost. Because see, for the Sri Lankans, what happens is we have the talent. It's not that it isn't, but you have to have a lot of financial support to push them up as well.
It's basically down to the liquids, how much liquids you can spill into a sport of this nature.
Oh yes.
Otherwise, we have quite a cream of talent. And not to forget the Veera Singh, who's now in Canada.
Yes.
He was a superb driver in real world racing in Sri Lanka, and we don't see him now. So Jevan is upcoming a budding racing driver. Actually, when I used to see him in Sepang and other races that he took part in karting, he reminded me of the very young Lewis Hamilton, because I've seen Lewis Hamilton's race footage. I used to enjoy his driving to see what sort of a race driver he has been at his kinder age. That is what Jevan David is all about. So at least what this Ceylon Motorsports Club is doing for the youngsters in Sri Lanka is commendable. Now let us focus ourselves on to the race start. We have Shanuk on P1 on the basis of the reverse grid, and we have Viren and Shanuk locking on the front row. And Rai Suvaim, my very good friend from the Formula LGBs back in 2012, is on P3, and Thiago Riaz on P11, Emdad Hussain on P12, and Emdad doesn't manage to start the race as well again. However, we are on the second race, first lap, and look at this battle already. Viren Buteju challenging Shanuk into lead, and Shanuk managing to come back on. Oh dear, look at Viren. Viren is managing to stay ahead, and Thiago has joined the party. He's on P3, going on the inside of Rai Suvaim, and moves on to P2. And Rai Suvaim on P3. Rai Suvaim is closely challenged by Mevan Ferreira from Kevin Ferreira, and Kevin from Chanuk. Now this is where it all works. As we quite rightly predicted, in the very first opening lap itself, the middle order, the previous front runners have managed to come forward. But look at Viren Buteju. He is on the lead, and he is not going to be an easy pass by for the rest of the pack. Thiago is on P2, Rai is on P3, Kevin Ferreira on P4. Mevan is coming into challenge. Oh, look at that! Look at that! Oh! Look at that, through the corkscrew of the very first lap of this race too. That was Bailey, and Viren is still managing to stay ahead. Rice has been challenged by, oh dear, what happened to Rice? Rice has moved down on the order. He's on P3, Mevani is on P2 now. Thiago down to P4. Where's Brian? Brian is on P5. Now we are with Rice from Mevan from Rise. Mevan is on P2 in his pink chromium liveried car. That's a beautiful car to watch. And here comes Thiago on P3, trying to move away from Mevan and trying to be a contender to Mevan Ferreira and moving away from Brian. Brian is not an easy customer to handle. Brian is such a cool dude. He's going to be creating some concerns in Thiago Pereira's rearview mirrors. Alright, we are now with Sishan. Sishan is a driver worthy being mentioned of because he... And let me focus our attention. Okay, through the corkscrew, we are on the second lap. Look at Viren. Viren is managing to pull a beautiful gap and he's clocking the fastest overall sector times. And does this suggest me, Ryan, I'm asking this question, when Viren is ahead, he seems to be a much cooler customer than he's from the middle of the order or the tail ender.
Well, Ruchan, looking at it, I think what he's done is he's got his setup right.
For the second race?
For his second race, he's come in and he set that car up exactly how. He looked at all the areas where he was losing traction and so many factors previously, and he has also come in and he has set the car up right just. So with that, he has managed to pull away. But we are only on the third lap, so it's only time that will tell how the cars are going to perform.
That is true, and quite a lot to happen. And you look at Mevan. Mevan managed to bring the gap less than under 2 seconds, and Mevan is challenging Viren quite frantically. Look at the tires, identical tire wear on both these cars, probably because they are on the third lap. Let's look at some aggressive drivers like Kevin Ferreira, shall we? He's on the 6th lap, equal tire wear compared to Viren. And look at Sishan, a bit more tire wear there. Sishan is coming through the corkscrew now, and he's on the 5th place. He's trying to challenge Brian Ferreira a little off striking distance. It's 1.2 seconds away from Brian Ferreira. Let us look at Thiago. Thiago is on P3, and now his gap to Brian Ferreira is coming down to less than a second. Brian is joining the party on the front runners, and Brian is on P4 and attacking Thiago Ferreira. Let's take our look, focus back to the middle order. Look at this. P7, Riaz Hafrat is running away from Dason Dawson, just under a second of a gap.
And Kevin is making his way up.
Kevin has moved in to P6, and Sishan is now being closely challenged. He's on the mirror. He's on the sights. He's on the sights of Kevin, and Sishan has Brian on his sides. Brian has Thiago on his sides, and Thiago a little distant from Mevan Ferreira with 1.5 seconds gap. And Mevan is also maintaining his rhythm currently with a 1.5 second gap to the leader and also to P3 Thiago Ferreira. Let's look at the tail enders, how these tail enders are faring. Rise away, oh dear, what has happened to you, Rise? You were up there and suddenly everybody has left you and you are at P11. And look at this, the P1 Shanuk, who managed to start the race on P1 but with his less experience, I would say, and also being overthrilled and overwhelmed, being the P1, probably would have lost a little bit cool and lost the track position to the front leading runners, and they lost it all at the Rahal straight, breaking into the corkscrew. That is where things can really go wrong. It's very technical track. Speaking of Laguna Seca, let's go to Angelo Senaratne, a very cool customer at P9 right now. And what can Angelo Senaratne spring in this second race of Pro? And this race is brought to you by Ceylon Motorsports Club in partnership with Lab 57, J Homes, House of Glass, and with the social media partnership coming from Pit Pass. Look at Sishan. He has managed to clock in the fastest lap time. So Sishan is never to be discounted. He's a very good driver, currently battling at a P5, challenging Brian. The gap is down to half a second. Brian. Oh, look at that. Driving through the corkscrew. The gap is coming so close. So close. Can Sishan spring a surprise in the rearview mirrors of Brian Ferreira? Only the time can tell. Brian Ferreira is ghosting a bit, and Sishan is almost on his tail, bumper to bumper in the we are on the 5th lap. The drivers are starting the 6th lap right now, And going into the Andretti hairpin, can Seshan take it on the inside? No, Brian parks his car beautifully on the inside. Go through the Andretti, quite safer. But look at Seshan. Seshan in his green chromium liveried Nissan GTR is actually giving his absolute best on this Sunday evening. Look at how the lighting conditions have changed at Laguna Seca. You're on the sunset, the brink of the sunset, and this, please talk us through how this would affect the drivers, their driving style, the track temperatures, the tire temperatures, and on the tire wear. How would this affect Ryan?
Well, all in all, Rukshan, when you look at it, they are actually driving really clean. But of course, in that kind of light, with that temperature, it's obvious the cars are not going to be performing how they were performing earlier. So they have to keep toggling around with all their settings to keep these cars running at the way they are, at that pace, right? But again, it's very clean because if you see, there haven't been very many incidents, nothing. All the guys are, they really not.
No bumping, no T-boning, no
been
brushing.
Yeah, you would have that, obviously, that overconfidence. Sometimes you might tend to power through and get it into a bit of a slide and put it back, but that's all part of the game, right?
That is part and parcel of the game. And we are driving with Kevin Ferreira, the previous race winner.
Yes.
He's only managed to climb up to P6. Brian has managed to do it better because he finished P2 in the previous race. However, he has managed to close in on the P3 Thiago Ferreira. Brian is still stuck at P4. We are in about 2 laps time. We will be marking the halfway of this 18-lap race. And what would Brian do?
It would be interesting to watch when they get into their pit strategies. At that point, we will be able to understand where they're going. Because, see, even though we are watching a great interesting race, after your pit stop, everything is going to change.
Look at Thiago Ryan.
Oh, yes.
Thiago has managed to close very tight in on
Just
Mivan Pereira.
0.3 of a second behind.
Just 0.3. And just coming out of that corkscrew and going into that rainy curve, he was very, very close, just 0.2 of a second. And now, again, back onto the main stretch. Viren is leading. Viren Boteju, a real-world racing driver from Mivan Pereira. Mivan Pereira on P2. Closely challenged by Thiago Ferreira. Going into the Andretti hairpin right about now.
I think Thiago is on his tail. Thiago's going to take him. Thiago will definitely pull off a move somewhere down the line.
Let's take a look at Mivan Pereira's and Thiago's tires. Thiago's tire wear is a little bit more because he's probably giving it a bit of gas, extra gas on the exit. That's why his rears are going, and also he's down on the fuel. Whereas Mivan Pereira's, Thiago Pereira's fuel, it's the same. But when you talk about the tire wear, a little tire wear more on Thiago Pereira.
But we have to also see one other factor. They are running 2 different cars.
2 different cars. That
right?
is precise.
If it was the same GTR, it would be different. Then you could have a better
comparison
on that.
Let us look at 2 GTRs. Here we have Thiago Pereira with slightly more tire wear compared to Brian Pereira, lesser tire wear, and lesser fuel consumption.
So again, it comes down to your strategy, your settings, all of that. It's basically it's the driver's call.
I'm just wondering to see now. Look at Brian Pereira. He's on. While we were talking, Brian has moved into P3. That is because Thiago has gone into pits. And let's take a look at this pit stop of Thiago. Shall we? Yes. Okay, Thiago is in the pits, taking his fresh rubber. Is he refueling? Yes. Probably slightly more than a quarter tank, I reckon. He's off. He has taken fresh rubber, more than 3/4 of the tank. So Thiago is planning to attack.
Oh yes, he's got a different strategy this time around.
Because he was on fumes on the first race.
Exactly. And he lost a lot even on his tires and on so many factors.
That is
but
true.
Here he pulled in first. So he knows that he's going to gain a bit of an advantage.
So
right?
he's playing undercut here
Exactly.
over the rest of the pack, especially on the leaders. And we will see whether Thiago's race planning has come into exactly whether it's going to pay off. And while we are now focused on Viren, while we were talking about Thiago, we are at the half mark of the race. Viren is still leading, and Viren is coming into pits as well. Brian manages to stay out. Kevin is staying out. Viren Boteju, Bevan Ferreira, Sesh, they all are coming into the pits right about now. So while we have these boys at the pits, let's focus on our new race leader now. This is a very cool customer. When he's leading from the rest of the pack, it's quite difficult to catch this guy. Even Kevin Ferreira finds it a little bit challenging to give a run to his brother Brian. Brian is currently leading. Kevin is just less than a second off from Brian. However, today I see these two brothers are driving two different cars. Brian is driving the GTR, the Nissan Skyline, and Kevin is driving a Lexus.
Exactly.
Now the Lexus seems to be performing better because both are on the same tire wear. Look at the tire wear; it's pretty identical. All right, and he's still managing to close in on Brian. Is it the driving style? Is it the car? Or is it the whole setup of the car? I do not know to say. What do you have?
They're actually on the 10th lap, and if you look at Kevin's tire, it's actually very, very good, right? So he's actually really nursing that car, controlling that car, using it. Even his fuel, he's just a little under half a tank.
Oh, look at that!
Right?
While we talk about both the brothers, they are coming into the race, probably to get some fresh rubber and maybe slightly a little more fuel. Maybe quarter tank?
Probably quarter tank.
Yeah.
So but again, unlike when you're looking at F1, because F1, if you take a pit stop, is all based on the timing.
That's right.
Here, it's a bit beyond your control, right? So you have to really factor it in. You have to get the maximum out of that. You have to open that gap out before you can actually come in there to him. Because the order could just change drastically as soon as you put it to the pits.
Look at this contention now. The battle brewing between Viren Boteju and Seshan. And Seshan is being challenged by Brian. Brian was in the pits and he has come out of pits just about the right time, and he's challenging Seshan. So Brian has not lost much in the process of changing tires and taking some fuel.
Viren also did pit. He did pit as well, and he has come back out right on top again.
Right on top again.
Yeah.
That is
so
true.
His strategy, he pulled in just at the right time,
and it seems to be working for Viren very well. And now it's going to be down to these drivers to manage the race from here onwards. No more pit stops. They have fresh rubber, half a tank of fuel, and they can do perfectly well. So we need to be focused on these top three drivers. Look at Seshan. He still has the fastest lap record at 1:14.544. We have not seen any of these drivers getting into the 1:13th during a race, which may hint us that the track temperature must be a little cooler than it was before a couple of hours before.
Yeah, because in the previous race, a few of them did get into the 1:13 race.
That is true.
They did come into the 1:13.
That is true. And look at Seshan. He's managing equal gap to the race leader and the one behind. Viren is leading points just under a second of a gap, and he's also managing to hold Brian off a little over a. Look at that!
No.
Look at that! This is the battle. It was quite phenomenal. Oh, look at that!
He
goes around the outside and they're already
outside.
This is fantastic.
Fabulous.
That is fabulous.
Fabulous. Oh my goodness.
Seshan is proving out to be a better driver today in this race circuit.
A 12-year-old.
My goodness. Look at that.
When you say drive the socks off the car, I think that's what you say, but drive the socks off the car.
That is true.
It's unbelievable, that drive.
That
drive is just unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Fantastic driving by Seshan. A beautiful show he is putting up here.
Brian
on the
is also
12th
getting
lap.
close. Brian is also getting close to Viren. He's getting pretty close.
He's
on his tail. He's on his tail.
It's a three-car party, and look who's joining. Kevin is joining in on the rear. This is going to be a four-way battle, currently proving to be a three-way battle here. Look at that! That is a bit of a matching. I'm sure the stewards and the race director is going to have a look here, because he moved on the inside onto the rear of Viren Boteju. So Viren's car would have been certainly unsettled. And there's another battle brewing between Kevin and Viren as well. Who managed to stay off?
See, again, another factor, like what we said. Now that the pit stops are all done, it's all about the attitude of driving.
Brian has to let through. And in the process, He lost another extra place to his brother Kevin. Brian Ferreira, trying to obey to the director's order, manages to only clinch the 4th place.
Thiago is closing the gap as well on Brian.
Yeah. This is going to be much more exciting and probably going to be the best race of the day so far. And I love this battle. Bring up Ryan, what do you have to say?
So the gap between Thiago and Brian is just down to 0.3 of a second.
That is true.
Right. So
And this is very, very entertaining. Look at Brian. He's been sandwiched between Kevin Ferreira and Thiago Ferreira. This is a Ferreira party for me. Alright? This is a Ferreira party for me. And they are all made in the same gap. And look at Brian. Brian had to let Viren go. And look at that. Kevin has managed to move on the outside and takes P2 from Viren Boteju and comes back again. Look at that. That's the fighting spirit.
Oh, Brian is out. Brian is out.
dear.
Brian has lost it.
Unfortunate. Watching his brother battling at the front. Brian Ferreira, trying to join in on the party, has left the track and now holding on to a dear 7th position. Very unfortunate.
But the beautiful thing is the gap between number 1 and number 2. The 12-year-old seems to be pulling away from the rest of the pack.
And it's 4 seconds. While the battle was brewing for P2, this guy, Seshan, has had a very cool experience in this the sunset. He's enjoying his sunset, very orangey, and managing to nurse the car home. And look at Kevin Ferreira. Kevin Ferreira is currently on P2. Viren is not just going to let it go. Look at that battle brewing up.
Mevan
goes.
He pulled it back.
Oh dear.
Oh.
Look at Brian. Brian is coming to feed on the scraps left by Mevan. And Brian is still 4 seconds off Mevan. And Dason Ranatunga is the driver. He is the one who manages to take the advantage over the mistake made by Mevan Ferreira. Now let's focus again on the front runners, shall we? Kevin is bringing the gap down to 3.5 seconds to his leader Seshan.
But it's still not in his view. He's still not
He's
in his view.
still not in his view.
There is and we've got only 3 laps to go.
Look at this battle.
So-
This is the battle to watch.
Okay.
Viren is now challenged by Thiago. Thiago has Viren on the side. Shall we switch? Alright, there we go. Thiago Ferreira close to 0.2 of a second. And coming in. Oh! That was a little aggressive, Thiago. Little Thiago has just given it a little too much gas and lost the rear as a result, because corkscrew is not the place that you put your power down.
Exactly.
You're going to lose everything when you put your
See,
power down.
amongst even though you're running tight, you have to keep your cool. If you don't keep your cool, you're going to mess up somewhere.
Nah.
And then that's it. You overcook it and it's gone.
Look at this now. Dason Dawson, as a result, has managed to close in on Thiago less than half a second, and this is a 3-way battle. I love battle. Then there are more than 2 cars involved in it. 3 is the perfect sandwich to be in, and anything can happen. Okay, let's focus
Viren went wide. Viren went
Ah,
wide, but he put it
Viren.
back in. But he put it back in.
Okay,
Yeah.
so P2 is still with Kevin. Viren is on P3. Thiago is on P4. Dasun Ranatunga on P5.
And he's in. He got through. Thiago got through on Viren.
Beautiful.
Oh, and so did Dasun. Dasun is almost in there as well. Yes, he got him as well.
Alright.
He took him through. Oh,
That
my
is
goodness me.
that is a lovely move by Thiago. But I want to say, I saw that there could have been
and there's
match.
a bit of contact in there.
Bit of contact, and he's losing a lot of traction there. As a result, Mevan is feeding on the scraps left by Dasun Ranatunga. Now, before that, going back a couple of seconds into the race, I saw Thiago had a bit of a moment with the contender. So stewards may take a close look at it. However, Thiago is now moved into P3 and has managed to pull a comfortable gap of 1.5 seconds. And Kevin Ferreira is closing in on Seshan. We are on the penultimate lap of the race, lap number 17. Seshan is still leading. Kevin Ferreira is absolutely flying.
He's done a brilliant drive. He's done a brilliant drive. Right.
That is where Kevin has managed to close in on Seshan. Now, will Seshan respond? Because the gap is up again. back to 3.7 seconds.
It's been a very interesting race because Thiago and Kevin they started in the middle of the grid, right?
That's right.
And even with the pit stop, they managed to work their way all the way up to second and third.
That is
which
true.
is also not easy because it's the pressure factor. There are so many factors that come into play here, and they've really been on the ball.
And this is a fantastic drive by all these drivers on a beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon. And look at Kevin, he has managed to clock 1:14. And where's Thiago? Thiago is on P3, comfortably running away from Viren. Viren is now challenged by Dason Ranatunga. And look who's joining. Mevan has been taken over by Brian Ferreira. Brian Ferreira doesn't want to simply let this go. He's on the penultimate lap and he seems to be believing in himself, giving himself one last chance to close in on Dason Ranatunga. Look at Dason's and Brian's gap with 1.3 seconds. Now Brian is absolutely a very good driver. He can even attack Dason and even take Viren for that matter. This is
going to be a very close because it's Viren and Dasun.
Look at that.
They're just playing.
Dasun is going on the outside of the 100T hairpin. On the inside. He's all over. He's all over on Viren's rear view mirrors. Now this is where Viren.
He's come through. He just overcooked it.
Overcooked it means
cooked it over.
that is because he was too worried on his rear view mirrors. I was just about to mention, before I mentioned it was jinxed,
And he lost two places.
Unfortunate. And look who's joining in to challenge on Viren. It's Mevan. Mevan is moving on the inside, outside again. And going on to the right hander.
Beautiful move. That was a beautiful move.
That's a beautiful race. And while we were so focused on the battle going on,
Shashank has gap
won
again.
with the increased gap. Kevin P2,
Brilliant.
Thiago manages to take the P3, Dasun Ratnatunga P4, Brian P5, Viren P6. A very unfortunate situation for Viren. And Mevan coming home on P7, taking the checkered flag. Angelo Senaratna, a very cool customer, but unfortunately did not manage to contend with the front runners. Rice Umain is nursing his car home because he's low on fuel. He's gone, but still manages to take the checkered flag on P9. Had he had a driver behind him less than a second, he would have lost that place. He's simply bringing the car to a halt. And here comes Riyaz Safrat and Shanuk. Shanuk, the man who started on pole, finished last. And that was the race to focus, Ryan.
That was a fabulous. I think the commentators were kept more on their toes than the drivers itself.
And
because just watching
also,
it was just unbelievable. How into it they were.
I think we were testing our capacities of our lungs. We were screaming some of the lungs, and we did not have the time to breathe. It was such an intense race. Thank you very much, dear viewers. We will be back with you shortly with the round 2 of AM Class. This race is brought to you by Ceylon Motorsports Club with the partnership with Lab 57, J Homes, House of Glass, and our social media partner Pit Pass. This is the championship round 1, race 2 that comes to an end, and we will see you with the AM Class race 2. Thank you.